Deputy Assistant to Secretary General for Political Affairs and Defence Policy and Secretary General Special Representative in the Caucasus and Central Asia, Mr. James Appathurai. Thank you very much and welcome to the podcast hosted by Sector 3 Hub for Development. My name is Nini Shengelia and we'll be speaking about disinformation, digital disinformation, fake news and risks associated with it. By way of background, digital disinformation and fake news is not a new phenomenon. Obviously, we have heard of this before, and it would probably be a fair assessment to say that during 2020, we have witnessed infodemic alongside pandemic, and we have heard many conspiracy theories starting from the link between COVID-19 and 5G, and how 5G and COVID-19 are used apparently as an effort to depopulate Earth, and also a lot of stories about Lugar Lab, which in reality is a great success. And Georgian media is obviously not immune to this. It's plagued by fake news, and various methods are employed, starting from personification to deep fakes, etc., etc. And also the environment has been tensed up by inauthentic coordinated behavior report issued by Facebook in recent months. And it's become a real root cause of discussion and debate amongst different members of Georgian society, and has become a real problem because it's caused more ambiguity than clearance, to be honest. And throughout this process and throughout difficult environment, NATO has been very supportive of Georgia and of its partners in general, for which we are extremely grateful. And we are aware that NATO's policy is based upon building resilience and strengthening defense capabilities amongst its partners, including Georgia. So this brings me up to my first question. What would you say are NATO's initiatives in dealing with disinformation during COVID-19 pandemic?
So first of all, thanks for having me here. It's a real pleasure. I know I'm sort of distorted in this camera, but it's really nice to see you and to talk about this, because this is a really important issue for everybody. Georgia has unfortunately, and as usual, experienced some of the problems we're all experiencing first or early, even starting in 2008, but now it's as you quite rightly say, an infodemic for all of us. And we have extensive discussions about this. Actually, when the Georgian Foreign Minister Al-Talyani was just here, we discussed extensively disinformation with him. As you noted, the Lugar Lab being one of the targets of Russian disinformation. But we're all getting it, and we're all getting it all the time. So this is a big problem for us. And it didn't start during COVID, but COVID has made it worse. Or to put it another way, people are instrumentalizing COVID for their political purposes. So we see in every one of our countries attempts to spread all kinds of different narratives. Narratives that our governments are ineffective, narratives that the treatments are ineffective. There's a widespread theory amongst certain groups in the United States, but influential groups, that they don't want to take a vaccine because they are told or believe that Bill Gates will be injecting a tracking device through the vaccine into them. But this is a significant number of Republicans, according to a YouGov poll that I just saw. So there's that, but I think, so there's all the fake stories. And then there's the stories that are intended to undermine confidence in government and institutions. And then there is, and I think what you said was so important, ambiguity versus clarity. There's a substantial amount of disinformation that's just designed to make people unable to know what's true and what's not true. So when MH17, the plane, was shot down over Ukraine, we counted over 40 different explanations that came from the Russian Federation. And the intent wasn't to sell one of them as being true. It was to make people unable to know what is true and to give up trying to figure out what's true. So I think that's a substantial amount of what disinformation is out there. And then finally, I would mention election manipulation. And as Georgia comes towards parliamentary elections, that's something you need to watch for as well. So what are we doing here? We are working as NATO and with the European Union to call out fake news, to call out disinformation, and to counter it. But we're also, and we can go into that more if you want to, but we're also working ever more closely with our partners, Georgia being one of the most important. We've had for many years, as part of the substantial NATO-Georgia package, a track of work on supporting and developing Georgia's ability to work in the communications field. The United Kingdom has led that cooperation. We've worked very closely with the Ministry of Defense in particular. We've hooked up the Ministry of Defense, you know all of this, to our Center of Excellence in Riga that does tracking, that tracks bots, that helps develop professional responses. So we've done all that, but I can tell you, including following David's visit here, we intend to step it up and step it up with all partners.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Sounds all very interesting, and obviously without international support from NATO and EU, it's just impossible to deal with the problem of disinformation. And you have mentioned Georgian parliamentary elections. Obviously, that's something that's gonna, disinformation and digital disinformation is gonna get worse in the environment of upcoming elections. And I know that NATO is putting a lot of emphasis on civil sector and civil society. Given your unparalleled knowledge and expertise of the Caucasus and Georgia in particular, what would be your specific advice and recommendations to civil sector? I mean, what more is it that we can do in order to ensure that the environment during elections is fair and objective?
So, I mean, these are really, really important questions, and, you know, nobody has all the answers, but maybe I give a couple of suggestions, which I don't think just apply to Georgia. I think they apply to everybody.
Yes.
And, you know, one of our major allies is also heading towards an important election in November. And, you know, the amount of manipulation of their electoral process that we know about is gigantic. And of course, Georgia won't escape that, but, you know, we're all going to get it. We all get it. And so I think what I'm saying or suggesting now applies to all of us. One is that the news industry itself has to produce high quality news that is trustworthy. And, you know, that's kind of the basis. There's a real loss of confidence in traditional news media in most countries. And, you know, we have statistics for that. It's really gone down for mostly not good reasons, in my view. But anyway, they have to continue to do that, and they have to correct fake news. That's really, really important.
Absolutely.
But it's also important to correct fake news without amplifying the fake news. So that's a hard thing to do. Yep. So that's one thing. Second thing is the government, and I know you were talking about civil society, but everybody has to educate the public and educate children. This has to be done in schools. Young people need to know the difference between what's real and what's not real. You know, when I was young, which was long before you were born, the problem we had was getting information. Yeah. There was, you know, I'm one of the last generations to live through the pre-internet and then now internet days. Right. So in the old days, you had to like make your way down to the library, pull down a dusty version of the Encyclopedia Britannica from 25 years ago, and then, you know, search desperately for the information. Now the problem everybody has is too much information. And so the way fake news gets in there is, it's like a fire hose of information coming at you. So we need to educate ourselves and call out, be able to discern between fake and real. Then I think it's important for tech companies to play their role. People get their news more and more from their phones, their tablets, and from social media. And the numbers are quite clear and going up. I know American numbers, 93% of Americans get their news online, and 35% get their news exclusively from social media. And I just saw an Ipsos poll that fake news headlines fool, again, I mean, these are all about Americans, but they fool American adults 75% of the time. So, you know, it's really easy to be tricked. And to explain the magnitude of it, they did a big study on election manipulation in 2016 in the United States. The 20 largest fake news stories reached more people than the 20 largest real news stories. So that's the risk we have. So that's you know, another area that we have to work on. So the tech companies, they have to play a role by having tools that identify fake news, and they have to improve the level of accountability online, in my view. Total anonymity is allowing people, malign actors, to spread fake news. But you know, you mentioned civil society, and maybe you'll come to governments, but I think governments play a crucial role in this.
Absolutely, of course, yes.
And just 1 or 2 points on that. One is governments have to protect free speech. That's really crucial, because a lot of governments are using the crackdown on the COVID disinformation to crack down on journalists they don't like. And that is happening around the world, and it is reinforcing autocracy. So that is something we cannot allow. We have to protect free speech. But the other point is, governments can't say that or politicians can't say that every story they don't like is fake news. By doing that, they undermine legitimate journalists. It's not true anyway. So I think governments bear a real responsibility, as well as civil society.
Thank you very much. Absolutely. Media literacy plays a significant role, as well as all stakeholders, including, and obviously government, and is obviously number one in this. And leading up to my third question is actually about the media environment here in Georgia. It's something that we're proud of, because we think that we have free media, and we enjoy freedom of speech and right to receive information. Our internet is very much unregulated and free from censorship. What would be, I think you partially sort of answered this question, but what would be your personal view on media pluralism and media freedom of Georgia?
Well, I have to say, having visited Georgia, as you know, many, many times, the sheer number of journalists and number of journalists of stations, radio stations, TV stations, online, is incredible, and probably higher than in many other countries the size of Georgia. So there really is a lot of freedom, and knowing Georgians a little bit, I think there's literally no topic Georgians like to discuss more than politics, which I love too, so that's great. So there's really a market for it, and a huge media landscape that's quite varied. I also know, and you know better than I do, that there have been real concerns about pressure on individual media outlets, questions of ownership, political affiliation. And I can tell you that the NATO allies here, when they do their annual review of the state of reforms in Georgia, always draw attention to the importance of having a very fair media landscape, of not putting undue pressure on journalists, of allowing a full spectrum of political views. You know, Georgia's not immune to these discussions. Every country has, you know, journalists that lean left, journalists that lean right, journalists or outlets that tend to be more supportive of one party than another. My country, my city has that. And Toronto's pretty good, and Canada's pretty good when it comes to media freedom. But there are, you know, orientations. So it's crucial that doesn't happen. I'm quite convinced that Georgians know how to speak up for themselves, and they do that. But the system has to support them. So you will continue to have NATO supporting actively with programs and money, and politically with public statements and encouragement to the government, a free, wide spectrum media landscape.
Thank you so much, Mr. James Appathurai. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, and very, very interesting discussion. Thank you very much, and good luck, and stay safe during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Thanks very much. This is definitely one of those discussions where I had the strong feeling that the interviewer knew more than the interviewee, but thanks for letting me talk, and we'll be in touch. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.